Immediately, friends and family began calling me. We began exchanging messages and phone calls, just trying to understand what was happening. We all knew that this was something bad. There was a part of me that already knew that this was most likely a US military aggression, but of course, we needed to remain calm. So I just tried to wait until there was absolute confirmation. In the meanwhile, I was seeing videos and photos on social media of people like me who woke up to these loud sounds and they looked out the window and they saw that there were explosions around where they lived. And so in total, there were like 6 places in Caracas that were hit by US strikes. Not only military complex places, because the US is saying that they only hit these military sites, and that's not true. They actually also hit civilian areas, urban areas, civilian populations. For example, they mentioned Fuerte Tuna, which is a military complex, but Fuerte Tuna is not just a military complex. It has a lot of residential areas around it. So the strikes were actually quite tremendous, and they actually cause some civilian casualties, which we will have a balance about it soon enough from the Venezuelan government. So that's what happened. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, we got like the first confirmation from the Venezuelan government that indeed Nicolas Maduro, an elected constitutional president, was kidnapped by U.S. forces. He was not captured. He was not arrested. No, he was
Removed.
exactly.
Right.
None of that. None of that. We all know that the United States has built this fantasy narrative that the Venezuelan government is somehow behind this huge narco trafficking organization, with absolutely no proof about that, no evidence about that. They have been using that narrative to kill civilian people on small boats in the Caribbean for 4 months, and now they're using the same narrative to kidnap a elected president.
So look, there's going to be a lot of narratives and a lot of stories floating around. You all know the high level, right? We all know that U.S. went into Venezuela, secure the oil, and that's been talked about. There's an interesting take by someone I follow on X, Kai Wong. Um, you know what? I can go ahead and I'll put this up on the screen. What is this? So he said China lost $105 billion in investment in Venezuela. Why didn't Beijing protect Maduro? Why not seize Taiwan at this opportune moment? Because a deal was made. The US backs away from East Asia, China hands off South America, Trump cares less about Taiwan. Okay. That's Kai's take. Now he posts Trump needs Venezuela's $19 trillion oil reserves to pay down the US debt. He'll also take Greenland and Canada to secure the USD. Obviously, the CIA paid off Maduro's military, China. So he's putting together a couple of things which I don't think are crazy. Um, so we know that the CIA, it looked like the CIA had an insider to track Maduro's movements. There was probably some disruption in the normal response because it looks like the U.S. was able to very smoothly come in and take Maduro, which means that his defense was not that which you'd expect of a country with a military. Um, if the U.S. tried to remove Keir Starmer, I'm sure there'd be more resistance. The idea that we could just go in and easily pull him out of that country is a little odd. So there's definitely something to that. Um, there's the concept that the U.S. That Trump needs Venezuela's $19 trillion oil reserves to pay down the debt. So that's kind of merging the two topics that I think are most important. So we all know that this is for oil. They said it, but it's not really just for oil. It's also for control of your hemisphere, but it's also about something else. This is a and I'm not telling you that I agree with this strategy because I don't, and I'll explain why. And I'm going to try to keep this brief because I do have other things to do this morning. But the reason that they're doing this is because not only is it for the oil, but the U.S. has this petrodollar situation where basically Kissinger in the 70s, when the U.S. came off the gold standard, Kissinger went to the Saudis and cut an informal deal that everything it traded in oil has to be moved in dollars, right? So this secured the dollar as the reserve currency, right? We all know this. If you don't know it, you could do some quick research. It's not hard to find. This is what really was Kissinger's crowning achievement, securing the currency, quote unquote. Now, that led to tremendous amount of borrowing and debt, et cetera. It really accelerated the process of why your grandfather paid less for a house than you. So if you're a young person, you're sitting there, you're saying, why is everything so expensive? Why did my grandfather pay less for a piece of pizza at the same pizza place that I go to? It's because of monetary inflation. You're going to hear all kinds of intelligent people and stupid people talk about well, good, this thing, this material, and they'll take you through all these things in economics. The only thing you need to understand is monetary inflation. The dollars that are in rotation now are worth less than the dollars that were in rotation 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. And because of that, you pay more for everything than your grandfather. Now, the reason that the currency didn't collapse, the reason why Americans were able to buy cheap goods that were made overseas, is because the rest of the world was propping up the dollar via the reserve currency status. Why? Because all these other countries needed to trade in dollars in order to get oil. And oil, for a long time, was the number one energy source for many countries. Okay, so now we're rolling along, right? So Venezuela is truly about oil, which is truly about securing the petrodollar. All right. Well, that's definitely the. I think that's probably at least 50% of it. Controlling your hemisphere, whatever that means. So the strategy that he's talking about is that, well, China cut a deal. They said, we'll lose our investments in Venezuela, but you guys got to sell us oil, and we're gonna use this to reunify. I don't know. I can't speak for the Chinese side. I can tell you the U.S. Is it possible the U.S. would say, whatever, do what you got to do with Taiwan? It's possible. I think China is banking on the fact that slowly but surely, people in the system that Taiwan has, which is closer to the U.S.'s system, are going to realize that they're not going to sustain their way of life through that economic system, and they will come back to the mainland. That China, the mainland China, will not need to force or bomb or do anything that the Americans just had to do to Venezuela. They won't have to do that. Okay? I think that's what they would prefer. Because could China have defended Maduro? Yeah. I mean, they could have. They chose not to. The Russians could have gone out of their way. They chose not to. They chose not to go out of their way to protect him, which is also going to slow down the development of BRICS as anything more than an economic handshake. Because if BRICS were the alliance that NATO was, okay, if it was becoming a military alliance, there's no way they could allow that to happen. Because why would you make an alliance with people that let you just be taken, right? So there's a lot going on there. Also, President Trump is much closer in terms of his negotiations and communications with Russia and China than previous administrations. So to do something that the Russians and the Chinese would not prefer, the only way to do it without receiving the wrath of those countries is to do it via some kind of backdoor deal, which is possible. The other thing is that China needs oil, they'll get it. Okay? They're going to get it. Because guess what? Oil is useless if you're not selling it. It's great to have it, but you still have to sell it. So there's no way that you're not going to sell that oil to China anyway. The other part is China's diversifying its energy, and China is developing its economy to the point where it's not as dependent on other countries in terms of foreign consumers and all that. So there's a lot going on here. But just from the U.S. perspective, so Trump takes Venezuela. Well, you haven't secured it yet, but once he does secure the oil, so now you have this petrodollar security, right? And you're saying, well, this is what it's about, right? And Greenland is part of that, and rare earths, materials, and all that stuff. All right, well, you still have to process the rare earths, which we can't do. And we still have to go through the unfortunate task of securing a country that is very large, very mountainous, and it's going to be very difficult because their people are not in favor of what just happened. So that's going to turn into sort of an Iraq situation. There's probably going to be militia groups. There's probably going to be terrorist attacks. It's going to be all kinds of things. This is not going to be so easy. I'd be stunned if this was easy. Then there's another aspect to it, okay? And that is if you set this precedent that this is how you do business, then yeah, maybe you can coerce your way through South America. You're hearing it already. He's saying Cuba's going to collapse. He's saying that Colombia better get on board. He threatened the new person in charge of Venezuela who won't be there very long. You know, he's mentioned Mexico before, though he doesn't really talk about Mexico that often, actually. It seems like there's almost a blind spot or ignoring it. I think he's thinking let's get rid of the rest of South America, and then Mexico has to follow along because they're going to be isolated. He already has Argentina in his pocket. Obviously, he has Bukele, so that's done, and El Salvador. So and Brazil's a question mark. You're not hearing a lot out of Brazil right now. I don't. Colombia's presence is very loud. Brazil, I'm not hearing anything, which is odd because Brazil's right there, right? So that's a little strange. So what does this mean? Well, number one, I've talked about this on this channel and I've said this on X, and stupid people had stupid comments. But if you if you consistently uh, need to physically bomb and destroy and at gunpoint take down uh, socialist regimes. Is socialism actually not working, or is it capitalism interfering with socialism? Just think about this for a second, okay? If you're gonna say that, well, Venezuela, Venezuela is a socialist country, it's a train wreck, and look at it fall apart. Well, did it fall apart or did you bomb it? If you now you're saying, well, Cuba's gonna fall apart without money from Venezuela. Well, Cuba might be in some trouble, but you had to go out and disrupt a business relationship that Cuba had with Venezuela to hurt Cuba. So it's not Cuba's system falling apart on itself, it's you interfering with it. This is the same problem we keep hearing. The Soviet Union went through the same thing. Okay? This is also why China doesn't trust the United States. Because China knows if the US can eliminate all of the spheres and all of the players that are in the BRIC sphere, then China will be next. The dream of the neocon is to knock out Russia and then go to China. That's their dream. If you think that's not their dream, you're not paying attention. They speak in projection. They talk about, well, Russia's going to invade Europe. Russia's going to invade. No, they've already invaded Europe. They already control much of the Europe's policy, and even if they don't, they have the sphere of influence, right? So what they want to do is they want to go in and they want to make sure that all of their quote unquote potential political enemies are eliminated. This is the mindset, right? So it's not that these country systems are failing, it's that we're interfering with it. All right, fine. So now let's get to what is it about this that I say I disagree with. Okay. Well, one, I don't like the idea of having to go in and point a gun at somebody in order to get what you want. That's not business. That's totally different. And some people say, well, imperialism is fine. If it's might is right, and it's our will, and we have the strength, so we have to use it and protect our dollar. Folks, you're not protecting the dollar by getting the oil in Venezuela. I don't know if you know this. You're protecting the system for the large corporations. You're protecting the banks. You're not protecting the average citizen, the petrodollar. The petrodollar didn't protect the American citizen. Okay? This is a total falsity. The petrodollar didn't protect the American citizen because the petrodollar was the excuse for the economists and for the people in charge of our system to extract all the wealth out of the dollar. That was their excuse. They said, well, people are going to still need dollars, so it won't totally collapse, but let's keep printing and borrowing. So what happened? The people who own all the assets their wealth grows. Everybody else suffers because when you go to the store, you inevitably have a weaker dollar. When you go to buy a car, when you go to buy a house, when you just get up in the morning, when you look at your 401k, everything is worth less. Even if the number is higher, it's not worth as much as it used to be because they're gutting it. So if you think that this strategy will help you, no, they're not lying. This strategy will help. It's just not going to help you. It's just not going to help you. Okay? That's the thing you need to understand. The democracy that they're protecting, the system that they're protecting, it's not for you. It's not for the average American. It's for the top maybe 3 or 4%. If you own a lot of stock in an oil company, if you're one of the shareholders of a large bank, a huge shareholder, if you're Warren Buffett, if you're Donald Trump, if you're in a class that owns all of the assets in this country, right? Because the top, 1 or 10% own something like 60, 70% of all the assets in the country. So the majority of the wealth is owned by a very small minority. So they're not lying to you when they say that this will help, but it's just not going to help you. Here's the thing. The petrodollar, if it didn't exist, what would have happened? We would have had to become more disciplined. We would have been forced to stop printing so much money. We would have been forced to stop borrowing so much money. We would have been forced to tie our currency to something, gold, silver. We would have been forced to become disciplined. And that would have helped the consumer in the long run because guess what? Now your currency is not getting devalued. And then also that would incentivize local business instead of international corporations in every town. So instead of your local bank being an international bank, you would have a local bank, which would have to invest locally in order to make money. And when it invests locally, it improves the economy. You ever wonder why Chinese people don't pay property tax? It's because the businesses in China, they don't own the land. Yeah, is that socialism? Is that communism? Yeah. Yeah, it is. But think of the economics of it. The business doesn't own the land. The land is still owned by the township or the province, right? Okay. So the business doesn't own the land. The business has to pay taxes. The business has to pay to be operational because they're borrowing energy from that land. They're borrowing human capital from that land. So this saves the people. It puts money back into the schools. It puts money back into the roads. It puts money back into the bridges. It puts money back into the subway. Do you know how schools are paid for in the Northeast? I can say this in New Jersey. You know how they're paid for? From our taxes. We pay for it. The businesses aren't paying for it. We have all these apartments popping up all over the state, and I'm sure this is all over the country. And the property developers, they don't have to pay taxes for 10, 20, 30 fucking years. The towns are saying build here and you don't pay taxes. That's how backwards our system is. And we think that's a good thing. We're like, oh, all these really slick township and business people, they just allow these property developers, they come in and they build in our area because we're so smart. We say we'll give you tax incentives. What is a tax incentive? It's no taxes. So then who pays for everything? The taxpayer, the citizen. So in China, the businesses are paying the bills for all the major infrastructure and the schools and everything else. And in the US, it's the taxpayer. It's the guy making $40,000 a year. He's paying for the school. Whereas the billionaire investor who has a new apartment complex, he's not paying any fucking tax. And those are the people telling you that the petrodollar is good for America because it keeps it going. No, it keeps the system going where they can extract every ounce of wealth out of the dollar. You know what's an alternative to bombing Venezuela? You know what's an alternative to forcing Cuba to collapse? You know what's an alternative to threatening Colombia? You know what's an alternative to having a military base in Japan, in South Korea, in Vietnam, all over the place? You know what's an alternative to fighting the Vietnam War, the Korean War, killing 1 million Indonesians, killing 500,000 Libyans, killing millions of people in Iraq, Afghanistan? You know what the alternative is? The alternative is not borrowing. The alternative is local businesses, a national bank where the U.S. owns its currency instead of a private bank. An alternative is investment in local communities. An alternative is co op businesses like nuclear power plants, like Larry Sharp suggested, where the township owns 50% of the nuclear power plant. Jobs are created, energy is created, and then you can bring in a data center and it doesn't hurt anybody. And you can use the infrastructure that you're building to better your area. That is a strategy. Okay? What you're seeing now is an emergency operating procedure. When the dollar is going to nothing, and when America doesn't actually reindustrialize, and when it's struggling to rebound. Now, is it all Trump's fault? No, it's not. It's not. He is not the first, and he won't be the last. Okay? He is one of the many. The Monroe Doctrine wasn't written yesterday, okay? It's a long time ago. So no, this isn't an anti for all the people who are on the right, because I know the left probably agrees with some of this, but some of the people on the right are going to say, "Well, this sounds all anti-MAGA." Don't worry about MAGA, okay? MAGA's not worried about you. MAGA doesn't pay your fucking bills, okay? So stop worrying about that shit. Grow up. It's not all Trump's fault, but today it's Trump's fault bombing Venezuela because he's the boss. He could have told Marco Rubio, "Listen, Marco, I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to tell Maduro, you better work with us because you know what I can do, but I'd rather work with you. And I am going to re-engineer the economy the way I said I was going to do it, not through this military action." There were other ways, okay? And he chose to take a different path. All right? He chose to take a different path. And unfortunately, unfortunately, it may cost him everything. Or because I think he is going to see a drop in his ratings. I think okay, the expectation of Trump is that he comes into uh, a roaring crowd, and all these people are so excited for him. And he sees a couple of clips that his handlers are sending him, saying, "See, Mr. President, see, they're all so happy." All right, that's not reality. Most people are disgusted, if not confused, and people want to root for him. People want to root for the country, but they don't really know what to make of this. That's why I'm trying to explain it to you. It's about oil, it's about hemisphere, but it's also about the dollar. Could it be poking at the British power structure, right? Because it's Britain that really props up, the drug trade in the Caribbean because they own the islands that all the money is laundered through and all that. Yeah, I mean London City is a big part of this, and I'm sure they're not thrilled to an extent, but remember, London City plays both sides against the middle because London City may own the banks and own the islands that all of the money laundering is going through, but London City also owns the currency that we use. Okay? They're part of that system. So uh it's not just London City being being hit by the Trump administration. That's not what it is, because they also own the currency. They're part of the network of banks that own the Federal Reserve notes. So they're not necessarily angry if we do something to quote unquote prop up the petrodollar because they can benefit from that as well. All right. So it's not 100% a hit on them. It does transfer some of the distribution of power back towards Wall Street and the U.S. Sure, but it's not a total hit for them. It's all part of the Basel Switzerland group. It's not a loss. So then you have to ask yourself, all right, so then what is the path now? What do we do? What does this mean? Well, what it means is that for the next couple of years, yeah, I do expect him to do something to obtain Greenland. I do expect him to do something. I think voluntarily the western provinces of Canada, they're gonna want to leave Canada anyway because yes, they are getting screwed by the government in Ottawa. Ottawa is there to prop up everything to the east. It's not there to help anything to the west, maybe less Vancouver. So if you're in central or western Canada, yeah, it's not there for you. So I think they're going to get Canada. I think they're going to get Greenland, and unfortunately, I think that you're going to see people adopting this, like, oh, the Monroe Doctrine. But the reality is that this will not help the average American. This is just about helping the people that already own all the assets, and it's still not answering the basic questions, which is what happened to reindustrialization, what happened to empowering the average American. The average MAGA person is an average American. The average MAGA person is not a billion-dollar donor. So if you're not doing stuff to actually help the people who voted for you, then why are you in office? This is why you're getting the quote unquote dissident MAGA. Now, as I pointed out on X last night, you also have, unfortunately, mentally deficient MAGA. You have people that are just blind, you know, you have people that are just completely blind to whatever happens in DC and they bend like a pretzel to support it, right? We already know that. You have your DC Dranos and these other people who go out and they just all they do is get on their knees and whatever Trump does, they support. I like good things Trump does, but if he does something I don't like, I'm not going to stand there and clap like a seal for him. And there are a lot of people clapping like seals because they just want to go along. And maybe that's how they make their money. That's not how I make my money because I don't make money from this channel. I don't make money from social media. I'm not a social media whore. Okay? I'm a regular American who has a regular job, or I work in the financial sector and I just go out and I just live my life, but I have opinions and I'm not stupid enough to believe the narratives that are fed to me. And it's my responsibility to try to put out into the atmosphere and into the universe the good energy that helps to provide people with some information that they can then take. And if you want to, I'm not saying believe every word I say. I'm saying take what I say and go out and do your own research. But do some critical thinking. That's the only thing I demand. Do some critical thinking. All right. You can like and subscribe my channel. I think I have more people watching my videos than are subscribing. It would be cool to grow the audience, quote unquote. But really what I want to do is put the good information out there, good ideas out there into the universe so that people can make good decisions for themselves. And understand that there's absolutely 100% more to this than what you're being told. So, good luck everybody. Have a great morning, a great day. And if I have time, I'll get back on later. But everybody stay safe, and hopefully nobody gets hurt in Venezuela or the U.S. or any of our troops. And hopefully this works out somehow. But frankly, I'm a little concerned, and that I've been to that court many times. I worked in the legal field previously. I fully understand. I know what's going to happen there, and I think a jury trial for Maduro would be interesting because I'd be curious to see if he gets a jury trial, who's on the jury, right? It's New York. It's not 100% that the people here are gonna, you know, I mean the judge is gonna be is gonna be against him. There's no question about that. The judge is 100%. I mean they're gonna. I mean they're definitely he's in the bag, because he's part of the Israeli U.S. State Department kind of infrastructure. But I mean, this is parading this man around like he's a terrorist or something. I mean, this is just unacceptable, man. It's a terrible look. We wouldn't accept it if it was done to us. So, you know, it is what it is. It's horrible. This is the part where you have to ask the president of the United States, was this necessary? I mean, you're parading in this man and his wife like he's a true criminal. He's not a drug dealer. You just pardoned the drug dealer. And by the way, if you're so concerned with justice, what about the men on those tapes raping those girls from Epstein Island? How come you're not arresting them? How come you're not parading them around? How come you're not investigating and forcing the AG to go after all the fraud? There's fraud in DC. There's fraud in crimes being committed, financial crimes, insider trading. There's all kinds of stuff you could go after. Why is this man being paraded around? This is not going to help you people forget about Epstein. This is not going to help people forget about all the fraud, the insider trading. This is not going to help people forget about the money laundering from Ukraine. This is not going to help people forget about what's going on in Palestine. So, this is just an unfortunate, horrible thing that is occurring. And I wish for the best. I hope everybody, comes out of this okay. But, it's hard to be blindly optimistic. Anyway, thank you, everybody.